My name is Wangbae Kim. I am the professor at Yonsei University and also the standing chairperson of People for Earth. And thanks for introducing me as a wonderful singer. We are gathered here for the first session, and we're honored to have four privileged speakers. And we have two ladies and gentlemen who will give us congratulatory remarks, and also we have two keynote speakers. I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Kim Sanghyup.
Chair Kim Sanghyup is currently working for the 2050 Carbon Neutrality Commission. He is the co-chair for that commission, and he has been leading the program in the KAIST, and also he has been the advisor for the Green Growth Program in KAIST. Mr. Kim Sang-hyup, starting from the Lee Myung-bak administration, has been planning the green growth, and he has come up with the future vision as a advisor to Mr. President. And he is the one who architect the low carbon green growth, and he has been exemplary in doing some of the climate activities. He's been working for the Presidential Commission for the Green Growth, and he is the one who tried to enact the framework for green growth. Also, he's the one who has been leading the voluntary reduction goal of the greenhouse gas emission. He has been very active in doing those kind of activities. I would say he is working for the Our Future, which is the first think tank for the green growth. And also, he is leading the Sustainable Development Center under KAIST. Chair Kim delivered his congratulatory video clip. Please welcome Chair Kim. Good morning. With the enactment of the Framework Act for the Response to the Climate Crisis, 2050 Carbon Neutrality Commission was newly established. I'm Kim Sang-hyup, co-chairing the commission. Dear Chair Kang Keum-sil, Chair of the Board for the Earth for People, I congratulate you on the hosting of the Ecozoic Forum 2022. Today, I have to attend the Carbon Neutral Green Growth Opening Conference today, and I feel so sorry that I could not meet you at the Ecozoic Forum in person. But I would say that great people from all of the countries will discuss the meaningful topic in a really systematic way. And I can tell you this event is truly remarkable. I think the Earth for People represent the spirit that we should all work together. I have joined the COP meeting starting from the Copenhagen Climate Summit in Denmark in 2009 to the one hosted in Glasgow last year. And after 10 years, idea came to me, something's very strange. COP means the Conference of the Parties. The party hereby means a country or a state. In the UNFCCC, which was released in 1994, there are 198 countries who are in the member of the United Nations Framework Convention. It is natural under the international law that states are the parties, but is the country really a responsible party to the climate change? Well, if you ask that question, it's actually not easy to answer because it is the earth and the living things that are directly affected by the climate change, including us, the humans. In 1995, the Conference of the Parties on Climate Change started with an ambition in Berlin. However, the Earth's temperature continues to rise, with no substantial achievement so far. I'm wondering, whether the countries are really the right parties. Already, the Earth's atmosphere is warmer than pre-industrial time by 1.1 degrees Celsius. Temperature rises are causing extreme weather events. According to the climate scientists, the 1.5 degree target cannot be met, and even the 2-degree scenario, which is called as a tipping point, can be really hard to achieve. Then the Earth would be inhabitable. Simply, we cannot live on the Earth. Can the power of the state alone stop this kind of trend? And as you know, the world has set a global goal of being carbon neutral by 2050, and we are trying to overcome the crisis of the humankind. To achieve this by 2050, around $1 trillion needs to be invested. 1 trillion. This ambition is to realize the sustainable decarbonization economy, which is consistent with the vision of low carbon green growth, which has been advocated by Korea. But it is not that easy to make it into a reality. People say it is a mission impossible. Last year, at the Glasgow Climate Summit, President Xi Jinping of China, the country that emits the most greenhouse gas, did not attend. And with the escalation of the tension between the US and China, China announced that it would suspend the climate cooperation with the United States. In the COP27, which will be hosted in Egypt, President Biden is still hesitating whether to attend the meeting or not because of his midterm election schedule. Britain's new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, has been reportedly discouraged King Charles' first overseas visit to Egypt for the COP27. India, which has grown into an economic powerhouse, has not yet clearly stated when it will be carbon neutral. Yeah, I understand that. Each country has its own conditions, but it is very difficult to solve the climate change with the power of a single state amidst geopolitical conflicts and frictions. Partnerships with the private sector and the global cooperation are therefore more urgent than ever. I hope the new ideas or the paradigm can be devised or derived from People for Earth. One of the meetings I'm attending is Global Environmental Pact. It is for the World Environmental Convention, and it is intended to give the Earth a legal personality to prevent human actions from damaging the global environment. I would say this is the goal that the People for Earth is currently working. The goal is to ensure that humans and the Earth have an identity as an agent in the climate crisis. This effort is still at its infancy, but it could become a concrete reality if the climate crisis intensifies in the future. Peter Olson, an international political scientist, came up with the concept. And because of the pandemic and climate change, he talked about a new concept. And we need a planetary governance. In other words, we should establish a global governance framework. Professor An Byung-jin, who is participating in this forum, has been advocated ecocentric biocracy rather than human-centric democracy? Actually, I have invited Professor An to my class at KAIST, and I listened to his special lecture. To be honest, I'm not sure when this alternative idea will become a reality. To be honest, what is deeply rooted in me are the anthropocentrism or selfishness. I'm not sure if I will be able to overcome all of them. I'm working for the Green Growth and Sustainable Development Group, where people think about decarbonizing energy, emission trading system, green technology development, and ESG to solve the problem of climate change within the market economy system. But I am looking forward that the efforts I and like-minded people make can interact with the alternatives that other people are currently working on. Because I believe in the power of an open mind. Esteemed Professor Mary Evelyn Tucker, who sent her message today, believes that the Earth and the universe are connected and integrated, which is deeply embedded in the ancient Oriental thoughts and ideas. And she argues that this can be a futuristic idea that can solve the current global crisis. In that regard, I believe Chair Kang and all those working for the People for Earth are at the new frontier to open up the new chapter of the new era. Just like you, I'm also working for a small group so that the young generation will grow into competent citizens who can walk for this world. Last but not least, I want to deliver my appreciation and I want to learn from you and please share the ideas and insights. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair Kim. And he underlined that we need private partnership rather than government-centric approach. And also he was asking for a new paradigm which can be like a revolution. And he also mentioned the People for Earth, and People for Earth is at the frontier of their innovation.
Sorry, so I'd like to welcome the next speaker who will give us the welcome remarks. And Maria, I hope she remembers me as a good singer. And Maria, nice to meet you. And Miss Maria Mercedes Sanchez is working as a coordinator of the UN Harmony with Nature program. And also she has taken part in very major important meetings. For example, the UNCED 1992 and Rio Plus 5, 1997, and also Rio Plus 10, 2002. And also, she is also doing the preparations to lead the adoption of 2030 agenda adopted by the General Assembly in 2015. Since 2009, she has initiated and led the UN Harmony with Nature program, and she has a very close partnership with People for Earth. Nice to meet you, Ms. Sanchez. We're honored to have Ms. Sanchez.
Nice to see you all. And yes, Wangbae, I remember you very clearly. Happy to see you again here. Good morning, everybody, and greetings to all of you. It has been 3 years since we were last reunited in Korea. The COVID-19 put on hold the plans of many in-person gatherings, and therefore this forum is a special moment to celebrate being reunited and sharing the advances made in our respective areas to protect the planet and people. For many, the pandemic has been a wake-up call about the human-nature relationship. And as Indigenous peoples have been echoing for centuries, it has become more obvious than ever that the key to sustainability and to assuring a healthy planet lies in restoring humanity's broken relationship with the land and with nature as a whole. Over the last 2 years, we have continued to witness important advances in ecological law and governance through the rights of nature and ecological economics. Both disciplines share common values such as fairness, equity, respect, justice, and mutual inspiration complemented each other in the journey to move beyond the Anthropocene. Earth-centered approaches call on humanity to listen to, take inspiration from, and care for the planet that sustains us, and recognize that nature is and should be the source of law, ethics, and how we govern ourselves. The contribution of People for Earth to this journey is of paramount importance. Over the years, People for Earth has advanced an important number of education and awareness-raising activities, which in turn inspire different constituencies worldwide. The adoption of rights of nature legislation and ecological economics has provided a plural, integrated vision of living in harmony with nature, and the body of Earth jurisprudence is transforming dominant legal traditions established in the Anthropocene and fundamentally informed by Western thought that separated humans from the natural world. I would now like to share a few recent key trends in this regard. To date, over 40 countries have recognized the rights of nature through more than 200 enactments and cases, and the rights of nature are now recognized in a variety of legal systems, including those based on civil law tradition, mixed law, and common law. The adoption of rights of nature legislation has been achieved in all branches of government, as well by institutional assemblies and indigenous tribal councils. So far, the most significant recognition of the rights of nature has been achieved through the legislative channel, followed by the judicial channel, the executive channel, institutional assemblies, and indigenous tribal councils. Furthermore, the worldviews and cosmogonies of indigenous peoples have been recognized in constitution and international law. As recent as this past September, the Spanish Parliament recognized the legal personhood of the Mar Menor and his basin, thus becoming the first ecosystem in Europe with rights. And in Canada, in May 2022, a federal bill was introduced in the House of Commons to give legal personhood to the St. Lawrence River and to provide for measures respecting its protection and to establish the St. Lawrence River Protection Committee. These two examples build on the many legal acknowledgements of nature as a subject of rights recognized worldwide. Another trend has been the rising number of rights of nature enactments, building, for example, on the corpus of international legislation, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and the Paris Agreement. The leadership role that civil society organizations have and continue to play in advancing the rights of nature must be commended. They often initiate the process of drafting proposed legislation, which is then taken up by a political official or party and adopted by a legislative body in the form that the body deems appropriate. Education is another critical element to enable and empower people to engage with ecological, social, and climate injustices and to reassess existing narratives regarding our relationship with nature. In general, interventions by academia and civil society in both formal and informal education on earth-centered approaches has resulted in changes in curricula, greater public engagement, and growing awareness worldwide. Teachers and students can support the promotion of earth-centered law and ecological economics. Most recently, at Stockholm Plus 50 held this past June, the inseparable connection between human rights and the rights of nature was reaffirmed within leadership dialogue on the theme, Reflection on the Urgent Need for Actions to Achieve a Healthy Planet and Prosperity for All. The leadership dialogue's first recommendation recognized urgent calls for governments to protect and promote both human rights and the rights of nature. And at the same leadership dialogue, the second recommendation called urgent calls for all actors to consider planetary boundaries, the need to recognize and protect the global goods, and the possibility of degrowth. 2 years into the COVID-19 pandemic, increased awareness and emerging policies leave no doubt that the current growth-insistent economic system must be replaced with ecological alternatives that nurture a harmonious relationship with the natural world. In this sense, transformative actions are taking place at the national level alongside the rise of strategies from the North as well as from the South for a well-being economy and the living well economy, respectively. For example, an important trend is the growing support for the Genuine Progress Indicator, or GPI, as a new and better metric for measuring economic performance and success to replace the gross domestic product, or GDP, as the sole indicator of societal progress and well-being. Furthermore, to protect water for the good of all in light of a tradable water price futures index launched on the New York Stock Exchange on the Nasdaq Veles California Water Index in 2020, the Special Rapporteur on the Human Rights to Safe Drinking Water and Sanitation proposed the development of democratic water governance from a sustainable human rights-based perspective, and the implementation of participatory climate change adaptation strategies instead of promoting commodification and financial speculation associated with water. At the 26th session of the Conference of the Parties, established the Glasgow Committee on Non-Market Approaches, providing parties with opportunities for non-market-based cooperation to implement mitigation and adaptation actions in their nationally determined contributions. As recent as this past June, a work program was adopted by the subsidiary body for scientific and technological advice to further work on this approach. This past July, on the occasion of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, the assessment report on the diverse values and valuation of nature was adopted, acknowledging that the predominant focus on supporting short-term profit and economic growth typically relies on macroeconomic indicators such as GDP, greatly overlooking the non-market values associated with nature's contributions to people. We are gradually seeing structural changes in both law and economics, and the above-mentioned examples provide a glimpse into the bigger picture which is unfolding as we advance in this journey. It is my hope that in due course, the Republic of Korea will join us as well. I would like to express my gratitude to People for Earth for its continued support to and collaboration with the UN Harmony with Nature program, and in particular to Mrs. Kumsil Kang for her unwavering commitment to advance Earth jurisprudence. I wish you much success in your deliberations. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your wonderful remarks. So you mentioned about the educational approaches and the citizenship participation. And also she mentioned that her continuous support for People for Earth. Now I'd like to move on to the keynote speech. The first speech.
Esteemed Professor Mary Evelyn, Dr. Mary Evelyn Talco will give us the presentation. She is the senior lecturer at the University of Yale, and she is the researcher at the University. She is leading the Yale Forum for the Religion and Ecology. Also, she's teaching at the Yale School of the Environment, especially on the master's course. She has been delivering many lectures to many students. She's the director for the Forum on Religion and Ecology. Her main research area is Asian religions, and her PhD thesis was about the Japanese Confucianism. and she got a PhD at the University of Columbia. After 1997, and she became the researcher at the Leishauer at Harvard. And she has been researching really a lot about the Confucian spirit, and she has been publishing a few books about the Confucianism. And she has been working with Mr. Thomas Berry, and she has been the editor for various books of the Thomas Berry, and along with Mr. Grimm, she has been doing lots of activities. And we have many of the Korean version of the books she has been working on, thanks to Dr. Tucker. And thanks to your efforts, we got many Korean versions here in Korea. She has been writing, she has been editing, and publishing many of the works. And as a keynote speaker, she's going to tell us about integral ecology for the flourishing future. That's the topic given to us. And without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Tucker.
Thank you so much, Wangbae. And thank you to People for Earth for the organizing of this very special conference. I'd like to thank our friends Jaidong Lee and Kumsil Kang for their work for so many years, especially to promote Thomas Berry's ideas. So thank you, and thank you to colleagues, Mr. Kim, who just spoke very eloquently, and Maria Sanchez for her wonderful work for harmony with nature. So I'm very grateful to be with you this morning. So I'm going to speak about integral ecology. It bringing science and religion together, joining ethics and ecology. Now, Albert Einstein said that science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind. The environmental crisis as we know it is truly a spiritual crisis because we have the science, the policy and law and economics and technology to make the transition to a flourishing future. But what is missing? The need for the spiritual energies to overcome despair and disempowerment, especially of youth. I think we all understand that there's tremendous alienation and despair among youth and other people of many ages. So this notion that we need to open the door to the spiritual but not religious, that there's a broad search for meaning, for purpose, and belonging, despite eco-anxiety, which is very widespread here in the US, but around the world, this tremendous concern of the polycrises that we're facing. And yet how to live life with connection to others, to nature, and to the universe is what humans strive for. Now we're dealing with the stress of climate emergency, all over the world. The tremendous floods, the fires, the rising seas are more and more present. And this is causing, of course, climate refugees around the world, from Africa, from Latin America, up to the northern countries. 90 million refugees is a conservative estimate at present, and millions more are facing the upheaval and movement from their countries. We know that the UN considers as well pollution around the world of water, of air, of soil. This is just an example of the Yamuna River in Delhi. All the rivers in India are considered sacred, and yet they are deeply polluted. And this has been an endemic problem for years. As well, we have biodiversity loss. We're in the midst of a sixth extinction period. We understand that the possibility of species disappearing before our eyes is very real. Scientists are speaking of witnessing at the edge of extinction. This is tremendous loss of life. And yet we have integral ecologists that can give us a broader sense of where we need to go. Thomas Berry is fortunately a person who is known in Korea thanks to these translations, thanks to People for Earth. And he's talked for a long time about the living earth community. Pope Francis as well, his notion of cry of the earth, cry of the poor, puts together a sense of environmental justice in his Laudato Si encyclical. So call for an integral ecology is combining eco-spirituality that Thomas Berry had strongly, a sense of awe, wonder, and beauty of creation, with eco-justice of the action that needs to be done, the care for people and the planet. This is coming together, and it has a tremendous appeal for the next generations. Our students at Yale understand this well. Now, if we start with Laudato Si, this care for our common home that came out in 2015, this broad invitation to Catholics around the world, but not just Catholics, Christians, Orthodox, Protestants, people of all religions, spiritual people and seekers. And that invitation has had a very strong response. So the response of the world's religion has been positive and affirming. They've written their own statements. They wanting to work with the Laudato Si movement. And just recently, on the Feast of St. Francis, a new film came out called The Letter, which is very powerful, identifying individuals all over the world being affected by and responding to the climate crisis, the climate emergency, really. Now, the response of environmentalists has been strong as well, very positive, from scientists and ecologists who realize science alone can't solve these problems. Bill McKibber, the founder of 350.org, said it's the most important document of the 21st century at a talk he gave at Yale a few years ago. Now, the encyclical begins with science. It says we've got to start with what science has been telling us for more than 20 years about this growing crisis. And then it goes to this gospel of creation, which inspires awe. The Pope speaks of the mystery of the universe, the harmony of creation in each creature, the interdependence of all life, and the sense of a universal communion. We can say this is true in many of the world's religions, in Buddhism, and with what Maria is doing with harmony of nature. Indigenous peoples understand this. So the line there is that the natural environment is a collective good, that intergenerational ethics is going to be so important to preserve the flourishing of the living earth community. Now, the next chapter, goes to the human roots. What are the problems here of the ecological crisis? Clearly, the instrumental use of nature as opposed to the intrinsic value. Nature is seen as a dead object. Consumerism and materialism is heavily critiqued in the encyclical. Speaking of a culture of waste, and we certainly know this in the US and in many parts of the North. But market-based solutions, well, in some centers, of course, are necessary, but far from sufficient, especially if they don't critique economic progress without limits. And David Korten has done so much work on this, and the notion of ecological economics, Thomas Berry embraced as well. Now, what is the solution then that the Pope is putting forward? It's an integral ecology, that ecology, economics, equity, and ethics all need to be integrated. These are not separate silos. And that we need to find and work forward with principles, I should pluralize that, principles of the common good. And solidarity with the poor and refugees is crucial, and intergenerational justice is what's called for. So much could be said about this, but I'm going to move to Thomas Berry, who actually affected the encyclical in certain ways by saying to Leonardo Boff that you can't save people without the environment. And so that phrase, care of the earth, care of the poor, came from Leonardo Boff, a liberation theologian in Latin America. But Thomas was trying to say, as he does in these extraordinary books, we need a new dream of the earth. We need a new paradigm. He speaks of the sacredness of the universe. And when this book came out from Columbia, a secular press, we were astounded that they would agree for that as a title. And he's calling us to the great work, that the action must be something that comes out of awe, wonder, beauty, and complexity of this whole unfolding of the universe. Evening thoughts are his later reflections on where we need to go. But he had this idea of an eco-spirituality, which he defined in this way. At its core, even our spirituality is earth-derived. The human and the earth are totally implicated, each in the other. If there is no spirituality in the earth, then there's no spirituality in ourselves. He was trying to get away from God-human relations or salvation outside the world. He's speaking of the spirituality of the earth itself. And he noted over and over again the spiritual presence in all life. He says, we can no longer hear the voice of the rivers, the mountains, or the sea. The trees and meadows are no longer intimate modes of spiritual presence. The world about us has become an it rather than a thou. This reciprocity with nature is what he's calling for over and over again. It is this renewed sense of reciprocity with nature in all of its complexity and remarkable beauty that can help provide the psychic and spiritual energies necessary for the work ahead. And he saw ecology as living systems, not just mechanistic systems. He says our studies in what we call ecology must lead to such intimacy with our natural surroundings. Only intimacy can save us from our present commitment to a plundering industrial economy. Now, the key ideas then of Thomas Berry is we need a new story inspired by science with a sense of spiritual meaning and purpose. He would also say we dwell in a sacred universe. We are in a living earth community. So this whole evolutionary story needs to be told not as something mechanistic, random, and purposeless. This leaves our next generation completely frustrated as to where they belong and how, and where's their spiritual energy going to come from. So an integral ecology in this spirit of Thomas Berry is where he says Earth is a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. This subjectivity of the living dimension of all species, in the sense of the animal world, the tree world, the plant world, the fish world, the bird world, the communications, the sentience that's going on, that was now being shared through science, actually. The understanding of communications of trees and roots. This is all what Thomas Berry was talking about as a communion of subjects. And again, this call to the great work of creating of a flourishing future, despite the circumstances around us. That is his call over and over again, the call to action and transformative action. Now, together, he was talking about a cosmic and an eco-spirituality, for it's an appreciation for the sacred universe out of which earth and life evolve and to which we belong. And here we have the sense of the origin of the universe coming forth in a great flaring forth, bringing out and forward the galaxies, the stars exploding out of which the elements of life came. And these amazing images that are coming now from the Webb telescope, where scientists are thunderstruck and weeping with awe and wonder at the extent and beauty and complexity of our universe. Here's a picture of the Milky Way galaxy taken in central Pennsylvania by a dear friend. How inspiring, this sense that we live in a universe of continuity of being to the living systems here on Earth from the universe itself. All of this evokes in us clearly reverence, respect, responsibility, a reverence for valuing complexity of Earth and the profound interdependence of all life systems. Here we have the rising of the moon that inspires us over and over again, the rising of the sun in the morning. This is at a house that we're staying at right now on the Long Island Sound. The setting sun, all of this inspires reverence and respect. Respecting all of life, a realization that life is connected and emerged here on Earth over billions of years of evolution. And we're not sure that there's life even in our solar system that may be out further, but why not pay attention to this extraordinary living Earth community right here before us? You know, this changed so dramatically, didn't it, on Christmas Eve in 1968, when we had that first view of a living blue-green planet from the moon, this sense of a water planet that has brought forth life over 4.6 billion years of evolution after 10 billion years of cosmic evolution. And here we have the uprising of mountains, of volcanic forces that have created the conditions for life. So the responsibility then for the future of life that comes out of this evolutionary story, we're responsible clearly for the care and continuity of the living Earth community, including all species, not just humans, the rainforests of the Amazon, of the Congo, of Indonesia, the river systems that are around the planet are endangered by chemicals, by pollution, by damming. The fish and the coral reefs, what is going to happen to the Great Barrier Reef off the coast of Australia? And the numerous fish, the collapse of fisheries, the difficulty of salmons with damming all over the world. Birds and their extraordinary migrations and patterns that we barely understand. How can they go 3,000 miles, 6,000 miles of migrating from Tierra del Fuego in Chile all the way up to Canada, have their babies and fly back again? And this includes clearly humans all around the world, this care for the life community and all of the next generations that are on the horizon, that are in our eyesight, in our hearts. How can we expand with a comprehensive compassion for all species? Now, this is why we made Journey of the Universe, which is in Korean as well. It's an epic story of cosmic Earth and human transformation. We're indebted to the new story of Thomas Berry. It's a film that was on PBS. It's a book from Yale Press. It's a multimedia project of conversations and podcasts. There's 3 online courses with Coursera, a website, and a newsletter. Many, many people have contributed to this. And of course, Brian Swim is the narrator of the film and my co-author. The wide appeal to the next generations, to students and youth. It's used in schools and universities, churches, retreat centers, curriculum's been developed. And a few years ago, before the pandemic, when we showed it at the Yale Center in Beijing, there were 77,000 viewers. And I want to mention something about the compatibility of views of cosmology in this film with Confucian cosmology as well. I'll speak about that in a few moments. But the living then within the new story is something that orients us to the cosmos, grounds us in Earth's living systems, nurtures us with water, air, and food, and transforms us with energy, with a zest for life, gusto. So eco-spirituality and eco-justice then is something that's inspiring both awe and action. Education, seminaries, schools, and colleges are beginning to understand this idea. I'm here at a conference, actually, these next 2 days on mindfulness within university curriculum and so on, because the health of students with eco-anxiety is so widespread. And you're going to be talking about, and David in a few moments, about ESG and business schools and companies and ecological economics, clearly in business, and leadership for long-term thinking for the common good that is on the horizon. Now, I want to just say, before I close, that Confucianism, which is the major worldview, system of education, of family values, of ethics, a cosmology that is comprehensive, is so compatible with this idea of a universe story. And Confucianism that is not only in China, but in Korea, in Japan, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Taiwan, is one of the most influential systems for understanding a worldview that's needed now more than ever. And I'll just make 4 points about what Confucianism contributes. And I call it the 4 C's. First of all, Confucianism has a sense of a continuity of being, of heaven, earth, and human. I'm wearing this heaven symbol of the cosmos. And heaven, earth, and human are one flowing, undivided reality. That's the cosmological trinity or triad of Confucianism. Qi, the second point here, is matter and energy, non-dualistic understanding that everything is made up of matter and energy. And one cultivates that. This is the third point, cultivation of qi in Tai Chi or Qigong, in the arts of medicine and acupuncture and so on. The body of the human and the body of the universe are one, flowing with qi, with matter energy. And finally, all of this, the continuity of being, qi as matter energy, the cultivation through education and through these arts, is leading to a common good. And that deep sensibility of a common good that is present in East Asia is something we deeply need for the future of the planet. We have hyper-individualism in the West, especially in the US, and we need, of course, creativity and individualism, but we need a sense there's no future without a shared future, and that's going to take a deep sense of a common good. Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be with you all.
Thank you very much for the wonderful comments. So the environmental crisis is spiritual crisis, and our living system is composed of economy, ecology, justice, ethics, and the common goods. And it's a combination of all those values and all those systems. How we can recover the spirituality is really important, and she underlined the importance of the Confucianism of Asia. And we have the next keynote speaker. And I think here in the auditorium, we have someone who majored in religions and who studied a lot about the Japanese culture. Professor Kim Ji-hyun from Seoul National University is here. She listened to Dr. Tucker's presentation, and Dr. Tucker is the expert in the Japanese religions. And also, we have a scholar who is interested in the religion studies, and I would like to ask Dr. Kim. Good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me. It was a great lecture. And my major is the Taoism. Dr. Tucker talked about the community and talked about the Qi and the universe, about the Confucianism. She talked about the Qi between the Taoism and Confucianism and across the East Asia and even in the Buddhism. The Qi is like a common denominator, especially in East Asia. The Qi is like a core pillar in the spirituality in East Asia, because we can understand human and nature as a combined entity. And that is the great finding that Dr. Tucker was underlining, and that was a really inspiring message for me and for many of the youth who are living in East Asia, and probably they need to find out the core value within their culture, within their tradition. And they should take action, and they need to refer to the traditional spirituality like a Confucianism. That's it from me. Thank you very much. Dr. Kim, thank you. And I hope that you can join us to talk more about the spirituality and the religion and the Taoism. And Dr. Tucker has been in Korea, and probably she will be back to Korea. And when she's back, we can have a more in-depth discussion along with Dr. Tucker.
Thank you very
I'd like
much.
to welcome the last speaker. We're honored to have Dr. David Korten, and he is well known to Koreans and especially our members at People for Earth. I don't know how to describe this in Korean, but Living Economies Forum. I don't know how to put it in Korean, but this forum encompasses economy and the living beings, and he is the founder of Living Economy, and also he's the chair. And also, so he's the founder and president of the Living Economies Forum and co-founder and board chair emeritus of Yes Magazine, and also a full member of the Club of Rome. He is pursuing new ecological civilization, and he has written various books for a long time. I think about 35 years. He has provided advice to businesses and also the international organizations, and he has come to conclusion that we are living in a suicidal economy, that it's quite threatening and shocking. However, we are living in the suicidal economy, and he is sending us alarming messages. We are living in a world where we need to make transformations toward ecological civilization. And for many years that he was involved in promoting education in low-developed countries. We're honored to have Professor David Korten, and he will talk about well-being for all. I'd like to welcome Professor Korten.
Thank you. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to explore together the choices now before us as the people of a living Earth. We have an extraordinary opportunity to create together a world of beauty, peace, material sufficiency, spiritual abundance, and creative potential for all. That said, we come together with recognition that our current dominant institutions have reduced the vast majority of the world's people to lives of desperation and are stripping Earth of its ability to sustain complex, intelligent life. Ours is not a broken system in need of repair. It is a failed system that must be abandoned and replaced. As Dr. Mary Evelyn Tucker has so beautifully presented, we come together informed by the deep and beautiful insight of one of the great minds of our time, Thomas Berry. We are living beings, born of and nurtured by a living Earth, born of and nurtured by a living universe. Berry envisioned a new era in which human societies would live in mutually beneficial relationship with one another and the natural world. My brief remarks this morning will focus on recent contributions of science to our understanding of living systems and the implications of those findings for transforming our institutions of business to bring forth an ecological civilization grounded in living system principles. I find it particularly fitting that this gathering is hosted in South Korea by People for Earth. People for Earth is an initiative inspired by Thomas Berry. And East Asian culture stands on a deep sense of community and the inseparable human connection with one another and Earth. It is a stark and welcome contrast to the Western individualism that bears major responsibility for the current human drive towards self-extinction that Thomas Berry called us to move beyond. The human species is awakening to the imperative to respond to Berry's call. Science now tells us we have less than a decade to address potentially irreversible damage to Earth. This is an emergency. Our home is burning, and we must act. Meanwhile, global inequality is growing at a record rate as power shifts from living communities of people and nature dedicated to the well-being of life to incorporated pools of money dedicated to growing financial assets. The greater their corporate profits, the greater the ability of financial interests to further shape the system to their advantage at the expense of people and Earth. The current growth of extreme inequality is breathtaking. On January 17, 2022, Oxfam International reported that the wealth of the world's 10 richest billionaires, the number of fingers on my two hands, had doubled their assets just since the beginning of the COVID pandemic. Meanwhile, incomes of 99% of the world's people had fallen while financial returns to the world's richest soared. There followed in March 2022, Forbes magazine identifying a global total of 2,668 billionaires with a combined wealth of $12.7 trillion, that number up significantly from the 2,096 billionaires Forbes had identified in 2020, just before COVID went global. Those competing for the top spot on the Forbes billionaire list have chosen to ignore the obvious reality: there will be no winners on a dead Earth. Which brings us to the environmental crisis. According to estimates of the Global Footprint Network, it would take 1.75 Earths to sustain current levels of human consumption. As you may have noticed, we have only one Earth. Long-term human viability depends on reducing the total human burden on Earth by 75%. Yet we continue to embrace growth in human consumption to grow GDP as our defining human priority, partly on the pretext that this growth will end poverty. Yet little, if any, benefit from current GDP growth actually goes to the billions of Earth's people who face a daily struggle to fulfill their basic needs for food, water, shelter, and other essentials. Consumed by that struggle, often in ways separated from family, community, and nature, a growing majority of Earth's people find little opportunity to experience the joy of living. This results in high rates of suicide and mental illness, and provides fertile ground for demagogues stirring up hatred and violence. As social and environment collapse renders ever more of Earth uninhabitable by humans, millions abandon their homes in fear and sadness to seek refuge in what remains of Earth's still livable places. Yet simultaneously, a favored few squander Earth's bounty in displays of extravagant excess. How could we humans get it so wrong? The answer is shockingly simple. We are captive to a deeply flawed story of an economics that would have us believe that money is wealth and that growing money by growing GDP will secure a better life for all. But life is what we want. Life is about being more, not having more. And money is nothing but a number. It will be useless on a dead Earth. To get into a deeper understanding of life, let's begin with our human body. If we include microbes like beneficial bacteria and fungi, each human body depends on 60 to 80 trillion highly diverse living cells acting in partnership to create and maintain this vessel of our consciousness and the instruments of our agency. And in their continuing exchange of nutrients, water, energy, and information, each of these trillions of cells makes constant decisions essential to our existence as a living being. Now turn to Earth. Think of Earth as a vastly larger, more complex living body. It too survives as a living being only for so long as its countless, highly diverse living organisms self-organize in partnership as a living community. Together, they create and maintain the stable Earth climate, air and water, fertile soils, and other conditions on which they and we, in turn, depend. Contemporary biology now recognizes that complex, intelligent life exists only in living communities of choice-making organisms that self-organize to create and maintain the conditions essential to their individual and collective existence. Over some 3.7 billion years, Earth's continuously evolving species learned to create and maintain the conditions on the Earth's surface on which all current Earth life depends. And so far as we yet know, Earth is distinctive among planets in its achievement of this miracle. A viable human future requires that we accept responsibilities consistent with our rapidly advancing scientific understanding of creation's extraordinary complexity, interdependence, and ways of learning. This responsibility presents us with a crucial question. How can we humans structure our relationships with one another and Earth to fulfill our essential role within Earth's community of life? Two preliminary findings at the forefront of the social sciences hold especially significant implications for how we structure our economic institution. First, more equal nations are generally more functional and rank highest on happiness indicators than do less equal nations. Second, once our basic human needs are met, our greatest human satisfaction comes from being more, not having more. Like all other living beings, we humans are members of a living Earth community. And membership in functional communities comes with both rights and responsibilities. Yet contemporary global culture reflects the long-standing Western focus on the rights of individuals, generally ignoring our interdependence and mutual responsibilities. We divide Earth into privately owned plots of land with few limits on how much one rich person can own or where. This leaves the rich free to shift the environmental costs of their actions onto others while protecting themselves from the harmful consequences. Now note that it is a very different situation when ownership is distributed and close to home. The benefits to oneself of responsible environmental management then become evident and immediate. Extreme inequality is the primary barrier to our human ability to recognize and address the unfolding crisis that currently threatens all Earth life. A primary driver is the profit-maximizing limited liability corporation that has long been a favored instrument of the rich to consolidate control of massive assets shielded from accountability from the consequences of how they use those assets. I grew up in a small town. My dad had a very successful local music and appliance store. He was deeply committed to providing our community with quality products that met their needs at a fair price. Note that members of the community were his neighbors, customers, friends, relatives, and even his employees. He continually stressed to me his defining principle of business. Unless you are in business to serve your community, you have no business being in business. Wow. The purpose of business is to serve the community. Profit is a means, not a purpose. I grew up believing this is what business is about. Why else would anyone be in business other than to find joy in making a living for themselves and their family by serving the community in which they live? Only later did I come to recognize the difference between a business owned and operated by members of the community in which it does business and a transnational corporation controlled by distant owners whose defining priority is growing their personal fortunes. Proponents of corporate responsibility commonly claim that responsible corporations make more profit. Now, that might provide incentive for egocentric, profit-driven owners to give more thought to social and environmental responsibilities, but it misses an essential point. Our world has a great many essential unmet needs, but growing the fortunes of billionaires is not among them. The time has come for business leaders who are truly committed to ESG, which stands for environmental and social governance, to take truly serious action. This serious action will include restructuring corporate businesses to limit monopoly power and transfer ownership to their workers and the communities in which they do business. There will be no humans and thus no winners on a dead earth. A viable human future depends on our coming together in mutual recognition that as living beings on a living earth, we have a common interest in restructuring our institutions, including our institutions of business, to support us in organizing as equitable, self-organizing, bioregional communities that share power to secure the well-being of all people and the living earth. We will prosper in the pursuit of life, or we will perish in the pursuit of money. The choice is ours. Thank you.
Professor Korten, thank you very much. Psychology and the organizational management, and these are one of the main research areas that the Professor Korten has studied, and also he had a vast experience working in developing countries. So he pointed out the over profits made by international corporations. One of the interesting points was that his background, he grew up in a small town, and his father owned a small local music and appliance store. And he was taught by his father that you have to think about your community. Unless you devote yourself to the community, that there is no purpose of your business. That was a remarkable message that we learned from the professor, and I think he learned great message from his father. So the purpose of corporation is to devoting to the community, and profits is only the means, is not the purpose. And thank you very much for sharing your powerful message. We are facing a variety of crises. I hope that the business leaders can pull up their sleeves to rectify the current issues that we're facing. So thank you very much for your wonderful message. In the second part, that we're going to talk about the ESG in the second part of the International Forum. And so Professor talked a little bit of ESG. Thank you very much. In the first session that we had speakers who shared about congratulatory remarks, and also we had two wonderful keynote speeches. So since we have a little bit of time left, I wonder if the audiences in the auditorium would like to ask questions. We have Chair of People for Earth joined here. I wonder if Madame Kang would like to share a few words with us. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Kang Keum-soo. I'm chair for People for Earth. Since 2015, our opening conference, it's been 8 years since we have held international forum. It gives me great meaning. I especially am very privileged to have great speakers, and also Mr. Kim Sanghyup and Ms. Maria Sanchez at UN. Thank you very much for taking your time to share your remarkable congratulatory remarks. And also, I was pleased to learn more about Thomas Berry, who is our spiritual leader and also our conceptual leader, and Professor Mary Tucker and Professor David Korten. Thank you for sharing your wonderful messages about integral biology, integral ecology, and also ESG. So this morning was begun by two abundant and very wonderful messages by four great leaders. It's daunting to fight against the climate change. However, sometimes although our journey is daunting, that we are getting great support by these our leaders. When we began this international forum, jurisprudence and the concepts that we are introducing were very new. So this kind of conference was quite divided. However, this year is especially remarkable because we are gathered by industry leaders. In the past, that there was tendency that the industry leaders have a separate discussion, and the people like us have a separate discussion. However, today the international conference will be a great venue for us to share discussions and to open a new chapter in our fight against climate change. But unfortunately, as the Professor David Korten mentioned, that we have only 10 years left, as many scientists point out, that we are in a stark era, and we are experiencing and feeling that we are standing on the brink of collapse while going through COVID-19. And although it is daunting that we have to boost up our energy to rectify the inequality issue in our society, and then there are conflicts due to our pursuit to money. However, we'd like to have good discussions to rectify our problems that we're facing. Once again, I'd like to convey my gratitude to all the four ladies and gentlemen who have joined us in the session one.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? If not, we want to close the session a little bit earlier. Usually we are behind the schedule, but we can close the session a little bit earlier than scheduled. Once again, I'd like to deliver my sincere appreciation to Chairman Kim of the Carbon Neutral Committee of 2050. Thank you very much. Also, from overseas, Maria Sanchez joined us online. Thank you very much for the speech. And there are scholars who are backing us and who are helping us. Dr. Tucker, thank you very much. And also Dr. David Korten, thank you very much for your great remarks. And I would like to deliver our deepest appreciation. This concludes session number 1, and I will see you in session number 2. Thank you very much.